I still remember the way the chandelier lights danced off the silverware, casting long, tremulous shadows across the white linen tablecloth. It was a picture-perfect evening, my in-laws' centuries-old London townhouse, walls adorned with ancestors' portraits, and the faint aroma of truffle risotto mingling with the warm, inviting scent of freshly baked brioche. Yet despite the elegance, an undercurrent of tension wove itself between the china plates and crystal goblets. I sat at the head of the table, beside my husband, Graham. My fingers trembled ever so slightly as I reached for my water glass, my heart pounding loud enough that I feared my mother-in-law, Victoria, might hear it. She sat directly across from me, her icy blue eyes glinting with that familiar mixture of curiosity and barely concealed disdain. My father-in-law, Richard, lounged at the opposite end, his posture stiff with formality, as though he'd taken a vow to uphold the rigid decorum of generations past. The evening began innocuously enough. Victoria welcomed everyone, her voice silky, but each word carried the weight of a subtle challenge, as if she measured my worth in real time. "We're so pleased to have you join us tonight, Evelyn," she purred, her smile as delicate and precise as lace. "And Graham, darling, how was your day at the firm?" Graham's response was polite but reserved. Beneath the surface, I caught the flicker of something darker, a hesitation I'd come to recognize. He'd been battling between loyalty to me and the pressure of making his family proud. I answered Victoria's greeting with practiced warmth, careful to infuse my voice with genuine affection. But as I tried to relax into the conversation, an almost imperceptible glance shot between Victoria and Richard, an unspoken signal that I felt deep in my bones. The first course arrived, silky pumpkin bisque with a swirl of crème fraîche. I savored my spoonful, hoping the rich flavor might calm my nerves. But just as I lowered my spoon, Graham leaned forward and, in a tone louder than necessary, said, "Evelyn, you really shouldn't have gone ahead with that impulsive decision." Silence rippled through the room, faces turned. My bisque trembled in its bowl. I blinked, trying to mask the flicker of anger that rose in my chest. I knew what he meant. The investment I'd made in opening my art gallery in Shoreditch. The risk had been enormous, and I'd poured more of my savings into it than I'd ever admitted to anyone, least of all to him. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking a breath and forced a smile. "Mother, father," Graham continued, his tone shifting from quietly disparaging to outright theatrical, "Evelyn thought she could single-handedly transform a neighborhood with a few canvases and way too much optimism." A collective gasp, my cheeks heated as the other guests, my husband's colleagues and old family friends, exchanged curious glances. My stomach knotted. I swallowed hard, but words failed me. "That's right," Victoria chimed in with feigned innocence. "I do wonder what made her think an art gallery was a prudent step when she lacks, shall we say, the necessary backing. It's rather bold, isn't it, dear?" My pulse thundered in my ears. Every eye in the room weighed me, judged me. I opened my mouth but no words came. Graham leaned back, arms crossed, the least hint of a smirk on his lips. He had orchestrated this. He thrived in the drama, and I was the unwitting star. Yet beneath the humiliation, something stirred. A quiet, fierce flame that had nothing to do with my husband's approval or my in-laws' respect. It was the same flame that had driven me to pursue my dreams against all odds, that had carried me through sleepless nights of planning exhibitions, negotiating leases, and convincing painters to trust in my vision. I looked down at my trembling hands, then met Victoria's gaze across the table. She held my stare for a heartbeat too long, certain she had already reduced me to ruin. But she didn't know everything. Because in my handbag, hidden beneath the lining, were the keys to a showcase that would not only silence their whispers, but turn their own doubts into applause. And Graham, he would be the first to discover it. I lifted my chin, no tremor in my voice now. "If you'll excuse me," I said softly, "I need a moment to freshen my lipstick." With deliberate calm, I rose and moved away from the table, leaving a hush in my wake. As I paused by the window, I pressed the button on my phone and sent a single word. "Ready." The chandelier's reflections fractured across the glass, and for a moment, I saw a different kind of light, one that wasn't tethered to anyone else's shadows. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. I lingered in the hallway longer than I needed to. The faint murmur of voices behind the double dining room doors reminded me I was only temporarily free from the suffocating eyes, the perfectly concealed daggers in my husband's words. I stood before the ornate mirror, the kind gilded in gold leaf and history, and stared at my own reflection. Not at the smudge of lipstick I hadn't reapplied, but at the war brewing behind my eyes. I didn't just feel betrayed, I felt awakened. My finger hovered over my phone screen again. One new message had arrived. Times asterisk. We're in position. It'll happen in 14 minutes. I slipped the phone back into my clutch, my heart thudding in rhythm with the old grandfather clock ticking behind me. The hall smelled of lavender polish and old secrets. I didn't turn back immediately. I needed every second to recenter myself. When I returned, Graham barely looked up. Victoria's gaze flicked over me like I was a page in a book she'd already read and deemed irrelevant. Richard gave me the kind of smile one gives to someone who's about to receive an apology they don't deserve. All of it stung, but I no longer cared. The humiliation had burned away my hesitation. "Ah, Evelyn's returned," Victoria said sweetly, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin. "We were just discussing Graham's potential promotion. Senior partner by the end of the quarter. Isn't that right, darling?" Graham nodded, the corners of his mouth twitching into a performance-ready grin. "Well, provided I'm not distracted by, extracurricular financial adventures." They laughed. Again. I sat down, letting the chair's weight anchor me. My silence wasn't retreat. It was strategy. They thought they'd made me small. But I wasn't just biding time. I was loading the first domino. 14 minutes. The servers reappeared, placing delicate courses in front of us. Pan-seared duck with a port wine glaze. The smell would have made my stomach rumble if I weren't fueled by adrenaline. Conversations resumed around me. About markets, legacy portfolios, and that one polo tournament that went terribly sideways, but it all blurred. Until the first vibration hit my wrist. A discreet buzz. I tapped the side of my watch and read the notification that bloomed on its surface. Asterisk, live now, Evelyn Clare, Shoreditch unveiling. Over 2,100 watching. Asterisk. I sipped my water, smiled into the glass. Graham leaned toward me, oblivious. "You all right?" "I've never been better," I replied with a smile I knew he wouldn't understand until it was too late. He shrugged and turned his attention to the waiter who'd just refilled his wine. Another vibration. Asterisk, 4,580 viewers. Comments flooding in, Snabber Seelen. My gallery wasn't just a room with paintings anymore. I had partnered with Vera, a cutting-edge immersive tech platform, for a surprise opening broadcast. Tonight's feature wasn't just about art. It was about stories. Stories of resilience, like mine, projected in real time across 5 European cities via augmented windows. London, Paris, Berlin, Amsterdam, Madrid. And the paintings? Each was from an artist silenced by public shaming, women mocked, dismissed, humiliated publicly by partners, institutions, families. My gallery was more than a business. It was a revolution. I saw the tremble begin in Graham's hand when his phone buzzed. He didn't check it at first. Probably thought it was a work email. But when it buzzed again, then again and again, he frowned and pulled it out. His brow furrowed. "Is this you?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Victoria looked up. "What's going on?" He didn't answer. He was scrolling now, fast. "Oh my God," one of the guests at the table muttered, their phone out too. This gallery, it's everywhere." "Evelyn, is this you?" I leaned forward, resting my elbows gently on the table, smiling for real this time. "Yes, I launched it tonight." Graham's face went pale. You didn't tell me you were ready." "Because I wasn't asking for permission." The silence was different this time, not stunned dismissal. Astonishment. One of the older guests, an investor named Colton, narrowed his eyes. "Is that Vera Tech? You partnered with them?" I nodded. They reached out after seeing one of my installation concepts. I curated everything, raised the funds, built the network. It took 14 months. The color drained from Victoria's face. You did this without any support? Oh, I had support, I said, folding my napkin. Just not from this table. Richard finally broke his silence. Do you realize what you've done? This is being covered by half the European press. You've effectively made yourself unignorable, I finished. My phone buzzed again. Asterisk 9670 live. Trending in UK, number 4. Then Graham's voice sharpened, tight and defensive. You could have jeopardized. What? Your promotion? I met his eyes, calm but unrelenting. You just humiliated your wife in front of your colleagues to seem superior? Did you think I wouldn't fight back? You went behind my back. No, I walked past your wall. His jaw clenched. For the first time that night, he had nothing clever to say. The room watched in rapt silence. Then another vibration. Times asterisk BBC wants a morning interview. Asterisk. I stood slowly, placing my linen napkin beside the plate. It seems I'll need to prepare for tomorrow. Colton cleared his throat. Evelyn, if you're open to it, I'd love to discuss investment options. Your vision, it's ahead of the curve. My gaze flicked to Graham. He didn't move. Victoria looked ill. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. My victory didn't require their approval. It never had. I stepped toward the door, my heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown. Then I turned, one last time. I tried to belong to this family the way you wanted, but tonight I remembered who I really am. You wanted to laugh at me. And now, you'll have to watch the world applaud. And with that, I walked out. The foyer greeted me like freedom, each step echoing more confidently than the last. As I reached the coat rack, my assistant was already waiting outside, car door open, smile wide. Everything's gone viral, she beamed. London Times just called you a cultural lightning strike. I smiled back, sliding into the seat, not looking back once. But even then, I knew this wasn't the end. This was the beginning. The morning sun filtered through the car's tinted windows, painting golden streaks across my determined face. As we pulled up to the gallery's sleek black facade in Shoreditch, the buzz from last night's reveal still hummed like electricity in my veins. Reporters milled about outside, cameras flashing. Across the street, a stunned crowd pressed their faces against the glass to catch a glimpse of the transformed space. Each painted portrait glowed under soft LED spotlights, their stories, once whispered in the shadows, now boldly on display. My assistant, Camille, hopped out and opened my door. They're lining up around the block, she said, voice trembling with excitement. Local papers, international outlets, everyone wants a piece of you. I nodded, stepping onto the pavement in my heels, feeling the weight of the moment. Good. Let them see what happens when someone refuses to be silent. I adjusted my blazer and inhaled sharply, memories of last night's dinner still flickering at the edge of my mind. We entered the gallery, passing through the sliding glass doors as they parted like curtains to a grand stage. Inside, the space breathed with energy. Augmented windows showed live feeds from Paris and Berlin galleries, each synchronized to shift scenes in Paris as visitors moved here in London. It felt surreal. Art had always been static, confined within frames, but here it moved across borders, challenged perceptions in real time. I walked to the central installation, a collection titled Voices Unbound. Each canvas depicted a moment of humiliation, a bride deserted at the altar, an artist publicly criticized by a critic, a young entrepreneur told she'd never succeed, captured in bold strokes and vivid color. As visitors approached, motion sensors triggered recorded testimonies, playing through hidden speakers. The room pulsed with their voices, each story echoing against exposed brick walls. A cluster of journalists fanned out, notebooks ready. I raised a hand to pause them. "Good morning," I began, my voice steady. "Thank you for coming. But before you ask about last night's dinner, I didn't launch this for revenge. I launched it for recognition, to illuminate the power of resilience. These are stories I could have fallen victim to, but instead chose to rise from. And this gallery is our testament to collective strength. They scribbled furiously as I spoke, eyes bright with curiosity. I gestured toward the Paris feed. Over there, at Le Marais, they just reached 10,000 viewers. This isn't just art, it's a movement. Camille gave me a discreet thumbs up. The numbers ticked higher on her tablet. After the press briefing, I led a private tour for potential investors. They asked about ROI, sustainability, expansion plans. I answered each question with data: partnership agreements, subscriber metrics, merchandise pre-orders. Underneath it all, I felt the pulse of something bigger than numbers, a shift in cultural narrative. But even as I basked in the glow of success, a knot tightened in my stomach. Because Graham watched from a corner of the gallery. No introductions, no invitation, just silent, arms folded, eyes flicking between me and my supporters. His expression was unreadable. Not anger, not pride, but something in between, like the final piece of a puzzle he'd never thought I'd complete. I excused myself and approached him. "Thank you for coming," I said quietly. He nodded without looking up. I wouldn't miss it. His voice was low. "You're impressive." I met his gaze, searching for sincerity. "I did this for me," I said, "not for your approval." He inhaled, a pained edge to his shoulders. "I know, and I should have supported you, but you blindsided me. I felt small, humiliated," I finished. He flinched, and I felt a flicker of triumph, but also a trace of something else in his eyes, regret. Before he could reply, Camille tapped my arm. "Evelyn, the Berlin feed is about to start the live Q&A." The screens shifted, and suddenly a diverse array of voices filled the room, questions pouring in from across Europe. I turned back to Graham. "This is bigger than us. But if you want in, I can't promise it'll be easy." He looked at me, vulnerability peeking through his usual reserve. "I'm here," he said. As I stepped into the crowd, microphone in hand, I felt that the real work was only just beginning. Last night was about a comeback, today was about forging a legacy. And standing in that exhilarating swirl of light, sound, and unfiltered truth, I knew I would never settle for anything less than the world's full attention. The sun had barely crested the rooftops of Shoreditch by the time my phone buzzed again. My gallery's director of operations, Mark, texted, "Twinemax master meeting confirmed for 10:30. They want numbers on the augmented expansion. Asterisk." I glanced at my reflection in the gallery's front window. Earlier, the people of London had seen me as the triumphant curator. Now I needed to prove I was also a savvy businesswoman. Inside the gallery, Graham showed up unannounced. He stood just inside the door, silhouetted by the morning light. His tailored suit was impeccable, but his eyes carried a hint of vulnerability I'd never seen before. "Morning," he said, voice low. I smiled tightly. "Here for the meeting?" He nodded. "I can help." In that moment, I realized he wasn't intruding. He was choosing to step into my world. Whether I'd let him stay was up to me. The day of reckoning arrived with an almost poetic sense of inevitability. When I arrived at the gallery that morning, the crisp air of early spring still clung to the cobblestones of Shoreditch High Street, whispering of beginnings and endings. I felt it in my bones. This would be the day I cemented my place not only as a respected curator and entrepreneur, but as a force to be reckoned with. My heels clicked against the polished concrete floor as I made my way through the expansive exhibition hall. Sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating every brushstroke of the canvases installed along the walls. Each painting in the Voices Unbound series felt charged with living energy, as though the souls who had once been silenced were now speaking to me and through me to the world. I paused at the center installation, a triple projection of 3 of the most poignant testimonies. The first showed a young poet, tongue-tied by public ridicule at a poetry slam. The second captured a female scientist whose doctoral thesis was dismissed by her male colleagues, her ideas stolen and published under another name. And the third depicted a mother whose voice cracked as she recounted the moment her own family disowned her for choosing a life and love they didn't understand. I took a deep breath, feeling my pulse quicken. Today wasn't just about art, it was about securing the future of this movement. Investors were due at 10:30, and they demanded more than emotion. They demanded metrics, forecasts, and growth projections. At precisely 10:25, Mark, my director of operations, appeared behind me. His normally confident smile was tight. I knew the stakes. "They're here," he said, voice low, "in the conference room." I nodded and smoothed my blazer. "Thank you, Mark. Let's do this." I crossed the gallery to the frosted glass door that led to the private conference suite. Inside, a long mahogany table gleamed under the track lighting. Around it sat 6 men and 2 women in tailored suits, the very image of corporate power. Among them, I recognized 3 names I'd researched: Anton Blackwood, from Blackstone Ventures, Simone Ricci of European Arts Fund, and Helena Martins, a prominent angel investor known for backing disruptive tech. They waved as I entered. Blackwood's lips curved in a polite, almost imperceptible smirk. "Ms. Clare, we're eager to hear your presentation." I approached the head of the table and tapped my tablet, sending the augmented display to the large screen behind me. The title slide glowed, asterisk, at the intersection of art and technology, scaling the Voices Unbound movement. I began with a story, the moment I'd watched live feeds in Paris that first night, as strangers in Le Marais paused in their tracks, tears mingling with smiles, as they witnessed testimonies they'd once thought were uniquely horrible, now shared by many and rising above shame. I watched their expressions, and I knew art had transcended its traditional boundaries. When I finished, the room was silent. Then, Martins spoke. "Incredible. But emotional impact aside, let's talk numbers. What's the current user engagement? Conversion rates?" I clicked to the next slide, a dashboard of data. Viewer retention at 78%, subscription conversions at 23%, merchandise pre-order revenue at $500,000 within 72 hours. Audience growth charts across London, Paris, Berlin, and Amsterdam. Social media metrics trending upward daily. Each figure was backed by clear visuals and footnotes referencing third-party analytics. Ricci raised an eyebrow. "These numbers are impressive for a first launch. But scaling to other markets, New York, Tokyo, will require significant capital." I acknowledged her concern. "That's where your expertise comes in. With an infusion of $5 million, we can establish local partnerships, deploy dedicated AR installations in 5 additional cities, and launch our Voices Unbound Academy, an online platform where storytellers can submit their narratives and curate local exhibitions." I detailed a 3-phase expansion plan. Phase 1, European consolidation, current. Phase 2, North American launch, Q1 2026. Phase 3, Asia-Pacific rollout, mid-2026. Forecasted ROI of 150% over 3 years, based on conservative market penetration estimates. They absorbed the data, heads nodding. I answered each question about IP licensing, platform maintenance, content moderation, community engagement. Every answer was precise, every hesitation covered by contingency plans. Then Anton Blackwood leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Ms. Clare, you've presented a compelling case. On behalf of Blackstone, we're prepared to commit $2 million immediately, contingent upon legal review. The remaining $3 million will follow upon achieving 100,000 paid subscribers across all platforms." A ripple of satisfaction passed through the room. Simone Ricci and Helena Martins exchanged glances, then both nodded in agreement. "We're in as well," Ricci said. For a moment, time slowed. Each investor's nod felt like a piece of the dominoes falling into place. I exhaled quietly, a surge of triumph mingling with relief. This was more than just money. It was validation. As I closed the presentation, I noticed the clock on the wall, 11:32. The meeting had lasted just over an hour. Every minute had been deliberate. I gathered my tablet and rose. "Thank you all. I look forward to transforming the world's narrative together." They applauded, a polite yet genuine round of appreciation. After the investors departed, I exhaled fully and made my way back to the gallery floor. There, I found Graham waiting near the installation of the young poet. He looked at me, pride and something softer, regret, mingling in his eyes. You were remarkable. I smiled, stepping toward him. We did it. He exhaled. I'm sorry for last night, I was a coward. I reached for his hand, interlacing our fingers. I forgive you. But know this. I don't need permission to pursue my dreams. I need partnership. He nodded. I'm with you, completely. In that moment, amidst canvases and cameras, I realized our relationship had a new purpose. It would be built on respect, collaboration, and shared ambition. No more secrets, no more undermining. We stood in silence, surrounded by the voices of the once silenced, now united in purpose. And as I felt Graham's hand tighten around mine, I knew the real challenge lay ahead, not just growing a global movement, but reshaping hearts and minds, one story at a time. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. The evening air was cool, carrying distant sounds of London's pulsing nightlife beyond the gallery's sliding doors. After the investor triumph, I'd expected exhilaration. Instead, there was a solemn weight settling in my chest, an awareness that our victory was but the opening gambit in a much larger game. Every election, every boardroom decision, every headline that featured our story would be a potential pivot point in shaping perceptions and rewriting narratives. Graham held my hand as we stood before the centerpiece of the gallery, the mother who had been disowned by her family. The painting's vivid hues captured her anguish and eventual ascendancy, a figure stepping into the light from a darkened frame, her eyes resolute. The audio snippet that played as you approached was her voice, strong and unwavering. I chose authenticity over acceptance. We watched a small group of late visitors cluster around it, nodding, murmuring. A young woman dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, and I felt a familiar prickle. Yes, it stung, but it was also becoming a source of profound connection. Can we have a private moment? Graham asked, his voice softer than I'd heard in a long while. I guided him to a quieter alcove, away from the buzz. There, under the warm glow of a recessed light, he turned to me, an unreadable expression on his face. Evelyn, all of this, he gestured broadly to the hall behind us. It's incredible, but I feel like maybe I missed something. Last night, your family dinner, and today I was a bystander and I don't want to be. I studied him. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Not for an apology, but for real partnership. I took a breath. I don't want you as a bystander either. I want you as an equal. If we're going to change the world, we do it together, with transparency, respect, and shared vision. No more secret plans. He nodded slowly. I'm in, completely. I smiled, relief and gratitude washing over me. But beneath it, I sensed a deeper responsibility forming, one that extended beyond the gallery walls and our personal reconciliation. The public would watch our every move now. The investors expected quarterly results. The movement's participants looked to us for authenticity. The media sought the next hot angle. Come with me, I said, pulling him by the hand to an interactive station, a touchscreen kiosk displaying our expansion roadmap. I tapped the North American icon. New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. Each city pulsed in red, marked as a target for Q1 2026. We have our roadmap, but execution is everything. I want you to oversee the New York launch, your hometown. Recruit local artists, engage community leaders, secure partnerships. You know that market better than I do. His eyes lit up. Yes, I can do that. Good. I tapped the Chicago icon. And I'll handle coordination with our Brussels team for the European hub. We synchronize our efforts. Real-time strategy calls every Monday. Dashboards updated daily. He studied me, impressed. Sounds like a plan. We embraced briefly, savoring the unity. Then a voice crackled through the intercom. Evelyn Clare, your 8 o'clock press call is live in 5 minutes. He squeezed my hand. Go shine. I hurried to the media room, an adjacent loft space outfitted with a broadcast setup. The tech team waved as I entered. Cameras, lights, microphones, all pointed at me. My heart fluttered with anticipation. I sat at the desk, settled my notes, and put on the earpiece. 3, 2, 1, you're live, the producer whispered. On the screen, a grid of news anchors and streamers welcomed me. BBC, CNN, France 24, even a live feed from Tokyo News Network. On the sidebar, Twitter hashtags #VoiceUnbound and #EveningClaire trended globally. I smiled. Good evening and thank you for joining me. When I launched Voices Unbound, it was a personal journey. But tonight, it's a global conversation. We're here to give a platform to those who have been silenced, women and men, artists and professionals, mothers and sons. Because every story matters, and collective empathy is the catalyst for change. I shared insights on audience engagement, our community outreach programs, and upcoming exhibitions in New York. I answered questions about balancing art and activism, the role of technology in shaping empathy, and the business model sustaining our movement. One anchor asked about controversies, the risk of platforming traumatic stories. I responded with conviction. We have a rigorous consent process, mental health support for storytellers, and expert curators guiding each exhibit. This isn't sensationalism, it's empowerment. The segment closed with a montage of gallery visitors from across the globe, tears of pain transforming into nods of affirmation. I signed off, let every voice be unbound. When the cameras clicked off, the room erupted in applause. I exhaled a smile, adrenaline and relief combining in equal measure. Stepping back into the gallery, I found Graham waiting. He offered me a cup of tea. Earlier, my favorite blend from Marriage Frères. I accepted, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. You should talk to Mark about hiring more support staff for New York. And let's schedule our first strategy call for Monday. He nodded. Already sent the calendar invites. As we moved through the gallery, a hush fell over us. A momentary pause in the relentless pace. A chance to reflect. I thought back to that fateful dinner, to the sting of humiliation that had ignited this journey. It had been painful but necessary. Without that spark, I might never have realized my potential, or claimed my agency. Evelyn, Graham said as we paused before the projection of the discredited scientist. Thank you for reminding me how powerful you are. I looked at the scientist's face, a woman standing before a chalkboard covered in equations, her expression a blend of defiance and hope. I turned to him. Remember this moment, because there will be days ahead when the world questions us again. He squeezed my shoulder. Then we'll face it together. I smiled, determined. The path ahead was daunting. Expansion across continents, balancing profit and purpose, navigating the tides of public opinion. But we had momentum, clarity, and an unbreakable partnership. And most importantly, we had the voices, once silenced, now unbound. Early summer dawn broke over Shoreditch as I entered the gallery. The sky a pale wash of pink and gold. Today was the day I would meet with the AR development team to finalize our next big feature. Echoes of Empathy, an immersive, augmented reality journey allowing gallery goers to step into the shoes of the storytellers themselves. It was a crucial innovation, one that could redefine how audiences connect with art and narrative. My morning started with a briefing in the upstairs studio. The room hummed with anticipation. Engineers hunched over laptops, artists adjusting motion capture suits, and UX designers mapping user flows on whiteboards. At the center stood Dr. Layla Hassan, our lead AR architect, her hijab vibrant against the sea of gray screens. Evelyn, she greeted, her eyes bright. We've optimized the gesture controls so that when someone lifts their hand, the painting responds with layered audio, breaths, whispers, footsteps. We're adding tactile feedback via haptic vests too. I walked between workstations, tapping on screens. A test scene flickered to life. The discredited scientist's lab, recreated in photorealistic detail. I watched as digital representations of test tubes and chalkboards swirled around me, guided by my hand motions. I reached out, and the chalk floated off the board, rendering a constellation of formulas in midair. The effect was almost spiritual. Layla turned to me. We're ready for user testing. Next week, blind participants will test emotional resonance metrics. I nodded. Excellent. Let's ensure we have counseling staff on hand, as before. This is powerful stuff. We need to care for our guests' mental well-being. She smiled in understanding. After the lab, I met Graham in the cafe next door. We sat at our usual table, steam rising from two flat whites. He looked over the morning paper, eyes scanning headlines. Finally, he looked up. "Evelyn, there's a feature on Wired about us." He handed me the paper. The headline read, "Evelyn Clare, the curator who turned shame into change." I smiled at the quick synopsis of her journey, then paused at a line that gave me both pride and unease. But can fame sustain a movement? I traced the letters with my fingertip. That's the question we'll answer. We returned to the gallery, where Marco waited to review the New York expansion logistics. We huddled in his office, blueprints and city permits spread across the table. I outlined our site for the Manhattan pop-up, a converted church in Williamsburg with soaring ceilings, an archetypal space for voices to resonate. "We need the zoning permits by next month," Mark noted, circling a date, "and the lease negotiation team is ready to finalize rent terms." I leaned over the plans. "Also, community outreach. Let's connect with local grassroots organizations, women's shelters, minority art collectives. We can host workshops before the opening." Graham chimed in. "I have contacts at the Brooklyn Arts Council. I'll set up meetings." The synergy between us felt seamless, two parts of a whole. Still, I sensed the looming challenge, managing exponential growth, without losing the intimate, authentic connection that defined our brand. Later that afternoon, I conducted a virtual roundtable with our tech partners in Berlin. On the screen, faces framed by German minimalism discussed server capacities for simultaneous streaming across multiple hubs. I juggled time zones, alternated between languages, and negotiated resource allocations, all while chief curator in London, expansion lead for New York, and voice for a global audience. By evening, exhaustion washed over me. I retreated to my office, a converted loft with exposed brick and a view of the gallery floor. I sank into my leather chair and reviewed the day's KPIs, membership signups, donations, outreach metrics. They were promising, yet the question from Wired lingered in the back of my mind. I needed to reconnect with why I'd started this. I picked up my phone and dialed Sophia, the poet from Paris whose words had opened the movement. "Hey Evelyn," she answered, voice warm. "I saw the Wired article." I exhaled. "I need your honest feedback. Is this still about the stories, or have we become the story?" Sophia paused. Then she said softly, "It's always been about the stories, and today people need them more than ever. But you're right to ask, keep centering them." Her words settled something in me. This movement was bigger than any headline. It was about humanity. The next morning, I drafted a community manifesto to share on our platform, a recommitment to storytellers, viewers, and supporters. It was a pledge: transparency, consent, mental health support, community engagement. I proofread it carefully, ensuring every word reflected our core values. As I printed the final copy, my phone buzzed. "Consueresque VIP's RSVP for London Gala next week. 420 confirmed." Asterisk. I paused. The gala, an exclusive fundraising event, would be our next big public appearance. It had to embody elegance and integrity. I closed my notebook and looked around my office. The canvases on the walls caught the lamplight, faces of the once silenced, now immortalized in art. I whispered to myself, "Onward." The gala invitation arrived by courier, a thick, cream-colored envelope stamped with gold foil bearing our logo. Inside, a handwritten note from our benefactor, Lady Pennington, inviting Evelyn Clare and Graham Forster to host the Voices Unbound London Gala at the Victoria and Albert Museum's Grand Ballroom on the evening of June 25th. It was to be the crown jewel of our fundraising efforts, an opportunity to solidify relationships with high-net-worth patrons and cement our cultural impact. In the days leading up to the gala, the gallery hummed with preparation. I oversaw design meetings for the event's aesthetic. Large-scale projections of storytellers' faces draped across the museum's ornate columns, immersive soundscapes in the hallways, and an echo chamber lounge where guests could listen to selected testimonies through discreet earpieces. Every detail mattered. It had to be elegant enough for nobles and financiers, yet authentic to our mission of honoring real, raw human experiences. Graham took charge of guest logistics, Matching his organizational skills with his creative flair, he pored over seating charts, celebrity RSVPs, and security protocols. One evening, he found me in the gallery's back office, studying mood boards and acoustical layouts. He placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You're doing amazing," he whispered, "but remember to rest." I smiled, grateful for his support but driven by an unshakable sense of purpose. "This night needs to be perfect," I replied. "Not for me, but for them, the voices we represent." The morning of the gala, I woke before dawn. The city was quiet, the Thames shimmering under early light. I sipped chamomile tea on my balcony, reviewing the run of show on my tablet. Cocktail reception, opening remarks by Lady Pennington, live auction of signed prints, keynote by Evelyn Clare, and closing performance by Maya Jensen, a spoken-word artist whose narrative of overcoming domestic abuse had resonated worldwide through our platform. By midday, the museum transformed into our stage. Crews draped velvet curtains, positioned sculptural installations, and tested lighting sequences that would shift from warm amber to stark white to accentuate the contrast between shadow and illumination. Symbolism at the heart of Voices Unbound. As the sun set and guests arrived in their finest attire, tailcoats, evening gowns, bespoke tuxedos, the grand doors opened and we greeted each patron personally. I watched as Lady Pennington's eyes welled with tears when she saw the projections of the poet whose words had first inspired her donation. A banker from Zurich approached me, his voice hushed with emotion. "Your gallery has changed my perspective on philanthropy. I want to give more." Once inside the ballroom, I took the podium. The crystal chandeliers glinted overhead as cameras flashed. I began, "Good evening, and welcome to the Voices Unbound Gala. Tonight, we celebrate stories that would otherwise remain hidden. By sharing them, we affirm our collective humanity." My words echoed through the grand hall. I introduced Maya Jensen, whose performance was both haunting and uplifting, leaving some guests visibly moved to the point of tears. The live auction followed. Rare prints, immersive VR experiences, and exclusive dinners with select storytellers, all raising over £1.2 million in bids that night. After the formal program, the ballroom cleared, and guests moved into the echo chamber, an intimate lounge where they could hear collected testimonies. I joined Graham near a tall cocktail table, our voices low above the ambient hum. He handed me a flute of champagne. "We did it," he said softly. I nodded, emotion swelling. We did, but there's still so much to do. He wrapped an arm around me as we surveyed the crowd, reporters, patrons, artists, and allies, interacting with our installations, sharing stories, forging connections. I felt the palpable energy of transformation. Just then, my assistant Camille approached, her expression grave. She motioned for me to step aside. "Evelyn, there's an urgent message from New York." I excused myself and followed her into a side gallery, where she led me to a small antechamber. There, under dimmed lights, she handed me a tablet. On the screen, a live feed from our Manhattan pop-up, Chaos. The newly installed projection screens were glitching, images of storytellers flickering, audio feeds overlapping in dissonant feedback. Visitors stood confused, some walking away. My heart sank. The carefully choreographed expansion was unraveling before my eyes. "Tell me it's just a bug," I whispered. Camille shook her head. "It's more than a technical glitch. The local partner there, Midtown AR Collective, they've pulled out last minute, citing contractual disputes." A cold wave of dread washed over me. If we didn't fix this, and fast, the New York launch would flop, investor confidence would waver, and the movement's momentum could stall. I turned back toward the grand ballroom, lights still shining, guests still celebrating. One misstep in New York could overshadow tonight's triumph. My vision blurred with determination. I pressed Camille's shoulder. "Get me, Graham. We have a crisis to solve." As I stepped back into the dazzling lights of the gala, I realized the real test was only beginning. Sustaining success across continents, forging unbreakable partnerships, and preserving the integrity of every voice. The door to the antechamber closed behind me with a soft click. Yet in that moment, it felt like the hinge of my entire world. To be continued. The next morning, I woke to an avalanche of notifications. My phone screen glowed with urgent messages. Investors demanding updates, press requests for comment on the New York technical failure, and a terse email from our legal counsel outlining the Midtown AR Collective's contractual allegations. My heart pounded as though it knew this crisis would test everything we'd built. I slid out of bed, my mind already racing through contingency scenarios. I found Graham in the kitchen, making French press coffee. The kettle hissed as he poured hot water over the grounds. "Sit down," he said, guiding me to the breakfast nook. He placed 2 steaming mugs before me. "We're in a tight spot, but we've handled worse." I exhaled and took a sip of coffee. "I need to coordinate our response. We can't let this derail the expansion." He nodded. "I've already contacted the New York team. They've secured a backup VR provider willing to step in within 48 hours. But we'll need to cover additional costs, about $150,000 out of pocket." I frowned. "That's not in the budget, but if it keeps the project alive, we'll find the funds. Let's reallocate the contingency reserve." He frowned at the numbers he'd scrawled on a notepad. "We'll need approval from the funding committee. Should I brief them?" I shook my head. "No, we handle this internally first. We can roll out a public apology, acknowledging the technical glitch, promising swift resolution, then spotlight the alternative provider as a new partner. Transparency will earn us goodwill." He sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "All right." I grabbed my laptop. "Let's draft a statement. Also, I need you to wire the funds once I get confirmation from our CFO." He opened his phone and nodded. "Consider it done." By mid-afternoon, Mark convened an emergency video conference with the London and New York teams. Around me, monitors displayed anxious faces dialing in from Brooklyn and Manhattan. I took a deep breath and began. "Thank you all for joining on short notice. We're instituting a temporary fix with our backup VR partner starting tonight. The show in New York will go live again in 48 hours. I saw relief ripple through the screens. One of our New York curators, Tio, gave a thumbs up. "We'll have technicians on site to manage the swap." I continued. "We'll release a statement at 6 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time announcing our commitment to viewers and thanking them for their patience. Camille will lead media relations, Graham will oversee finance, Mark will coordinate logistics. Questions?" A dozen hands went up. I answered each calmly. By the end, the teams felt assured and energized to tackle the fix. Later, I sat at my desk drafting the press release. Each word measured, an apology for the interruption, an explanation of unforeseen technical issues, gratitude for audience support, and a commitment to relaunch with improved features. I included a teaser for the North American exclusive AR tutorial series launching with the relaunch, and added value to soften the blow. Camille reviewed the draft and approved it. At exactly 6 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, the statement went live across all channels. I watched as retweets and shares poured in, the initial backlash transforming into supportive messages praising our honesty. Just as I felt a wave of relief, my tablet buzzed again, a breaking news alert on the Financial Times. I tapped the notification. The headline read, Voices Unbound Partners with Rival AR Collective, Industry Shakeup in Storytelling Tech, A subheading claimed we had secured a partnership with another major AR developer, the very one named in our statement as an alternative. I frowned. That wasn't supposed to be public yet. The article quoted an anonymous source saying the deal was brokered weeks ago, blindsiding Midtown AR. I called Graham immediately. He answered on the first ring. "They published it?" I read the alert aloud. "This was supposed to be internal until after New York stabilized. Now it looks like we orchestrated the glitch to justify the partnership." He cursed under his breath. "Who leaked?" I tapped the screen. The quote says, "A senior executive at Voices Unbound. They think it was one of our board members." Silence fell. Then Graham said, "We need to contain this. Now." We called an urgent board meeting via video call. Investors, advisors, and legal counsel joined. I opened with transparency. Yes, we had contingency talks with the rival AR Collective weeks ago to mitigate risk. But we intended to finalize and announce once New York was back online. We did not plan any sabotage or technical manipulation. A stern voice interrupted. The timing is suspect, Miss Claire. Do you expect us to believe it's a coincidence? I met the camera's gaze. I understand the concerns. Our priority has always been our storytellers and audiences. We had a risk mitigation plan which is standard in tech deployments. We will donate 10% of the proceeds from the partnership to a new empathic arts fund in New York to reaffirm our commitment to the community. Another board member leaned forward. And the leak? Who's responsible? I took a breath. We're launching an internal audit and have asked legal to investigate. I promise this will not distract from our mission. After tense moments, the chair declared the meeting adjourned, with a collective agreement to proceed under the revised plan. That evening, I finally returned home. Exhausted, I sank onto the sofa. Graham sat beside me, arm around my shoulders. We survived today, he said quietly. I rested my head on his shoulder. Barely, but we held together. He kissed the top of my head. Tomorrow, we tackle the fallout. But for now, close your eyes. I did, and allowed myself a moment of respite before the storm of tomorrow. Because in our world, the next crisis always loomed, and our resolve began anew each dawn. The morning light found me at my desk again, coffee in hand, screens blinking with overnight developments. The leak story dominated social and financial media. Investors were uneasy, some headlines questioning our integrity. The New York augmented launch was scheduled for tonight, just 8 hours away, and we needed to ensure no further hiccups. I called for an immediate team huddle in the gallery's operations center. Mark, Camille, and our CTO, Victor, assembled around the central console. On the main screen was a live feed from New York, technicians adjusting headsets, hosts rehearsing intros, beta testers awaiting calibration. I squared my shoulders. Today we show the world who we truly are. Not a company defined by one glitch or one leak, but a movement built on authenticity, resilience, and transparency. Mark nodded. I've secured additional insurance should any technical failures recur, and the legal team has circulated NDAs to all partners to prevent further leaks. Camille tapped on her tablet. Media teams are prepped with Q&A for New York's relaunch, and crisis communications are on standby for any more surprises. Victor leaned in. Tech team is finalizing the new AR modules with the Rival Collective tight integration tests complete. We'll push the software update via secure channel 5 hours before launch. I exhaled, pride welling. Excellent, let's make it happen. By midday, I was en route to the London Times building for a scheduled interview. As I stepped into the lobby, a young journalist greeted me nervously. Thank you for seeing me, Miss Claire. I know the leak story has been tough. Mind if I ask directly about boardroom tensions? I smiled warmly. Transparency is key. Ask away. The interview flowed with measured candor. I outlined our vision, acknowledged the challenges, and reiterated our commitment to storytellers. I emphasized the new Empathy Arts Fund in New York, the community workshops, and our expansion roadmap. I refused to point fingers at the leak source, promising an internal review and accountability. As I left, the journalist thanked me, her expression thoughtful. Maybe this openness would shift the narrative. Back at the gallery, I prepared for a transatlantic video address to New York viewers. Posters in Shoreditch and billboards in Manhattan flashed. Voices Unbound relaunch. Tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My laptop pinged. Board members and investors joining live. I adjusted my blazer and began. Good evening, New York. This is Evelyn Clare, tuning in from London. Last night, our technical launch encountered unforeseen issues. For that, I apologize. But tonight, we relaunch stronger than ever. With our new AR partner, enhanced features, and unwavering dedication to your stories, we invite you to immerse yourselves once again. Thank you for your patience, your passion, and your belief in this movement. I pressed the end call and exhaled. Real-time analytics showed viewer count climbing from 10,000 to 50,000 as the countdown began. At 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the New York pop-up doors opened. Guests streamed in, young professionals, families, art enthusiasts. They donned headsets and entered the AR world of Voices Unbound. I watched via remote feed as first-hand reactions flickered, gasps, tears, smiles. Technicians hovered nearby, ready to assist. No glitches. Back in London, I monitored each statistical metric: session completions at 92%, feedback forms glowing with praise. Investors watching the live data feed messaged their delight. But amid the triumph, a new alert flashed: an email from Lady Pennington. Her tone was measured. Evelyn, something urgent has come to my attention regarding the gala attendees. I need to speak with you in person at your earliest convenience. My pulse accelerated. The gala was days ago. What could be so urgent? I exchanged a glance with Graham, who joined me remotely in the operations center. Could this be about the leak? I whispered. He shook his head. It could be anything. Better to address it now. I arranged to meet Lady Pennington that evening, in her private study at Pennington Hall, an elegant manor outside London's city limits. The drive there felt surreal. Victory in New York, investors reassured, global acclaim building, yet all overshadowed by this mysterious summons. Lady Pennington greeted me at the door, her usual poise tempered with visible concern. The study smelled of old leather and jasmine tea. She gestured to a low armchair by the fireplace. Evelyn, thank you for coming. Please sit. I perched on the edge of the chair, every sense alert. She took a measured breath. I've been approached by someone claiming to have evidence that the gala funds were misallocated. They allege some of the auction proceeds vanished, and that certain guests paid under the table for exclusive access. She paused. I trust you, but I need to verify. My stomach clenched. Misallocated funds? Bribes? If true, my reputation and the movement could be undone overnight. I'm stunned, I said softly. We accounted for every pound. The auction records are transparent, open ledger accessible to our accountants and board. She nodded. I know. But this person claims to have documents proving otherwise. A cold knot formed in my gut. Who is this person? She stared into the fire. The message was unsigned, but insiders suspect someone from the gallery's finance department. They want greater control over funds and fear the AR partner's influence. Traitorous thoughts flooded my mind. We need to get to the bottom of this. She clasped her hands. I'm facilitating an independent audit. I'll keep you informed. But until this is resolved, we must proceed with caution. I rose, heart heavy. Thank you for raising this. I'll cooperate fully. Back at the gallery, I convened an emergency meeting with Graham and Mark in the boardroom. The late-night streetlights glowed through the windows as I laid out Pennington's warning. Mark's face was pale. We need to freeze payouts and transactions until the audit is complete. Graham placed a hand on my arm. Evelyn, I'll handle the finance team. I'll root out whoever's responsible. I weighed my options. Agreed. Camille, prepare a holding statement that we're conducting an internal audit to ensure full transparency. Victor, secure server and ledger logs. No one touches them until we have clarity. They nodded, commitment flaring in their eyes. As dawn approached, I finally stepped out of the boardroom. The weight of the day settled on my shoulders, but beneath it, a steely resolve. Challenges would come, leaks, lawsuits, betrayals. But our mission transcended these obstacles. I paused outside in the cool air, the first light of dawn brushing the gallery's facade. I closed my eyes and whispered, "For every silenced voice, we stand vigilant." And with that vow echoing in my heart, I walked back inside to face whatever came next. I woke that morning to the soft chirp of my phone's alarm, but even before the first coffee, dread weighed on me like a stone in my chest. The sun was still a pale half-circle over the Thames, and the gallery's streets lay quiet beneath a layer of dew. My team had already begun the audit. Mark and Victor poring over financial ledgers and server logs, Camille drafting statements, and Graham coordinating the finance department's internal review. They were fighting the battle, but I felt the front line was mine. I slipped into the conference room, its glass walls reflecting rows of empty chairs at dawn. The long mahogany table stretched before me, and on it lay file after file, transaction records, auction ledgers, expense reports. I felt the ghosts of the gala's success haunting every page. Bid amounts, guest lists, wire transfers. Mark was already there, brow furrowed, eyes red from lack of sleep. "Evelyn," he said softly, standing as I entered, We've compiled the preliminary audit. There are discrepancies. My breath caught. Show me. He handed me a folder labeled June Gala Funds. I opened it and saw a series of footnotes, subtle diversions of funds from the recorded auction totals. Nothing massive, but enough to account for roughly £150,000 unaccounted for, matching Pennington's tip. My hands trembled as I flipped through spreadsheets manipulated by rounding errors and miscredited wire dates. Who would do this? My voice was barely a whisper. Mark shook his head. The audit traced the anomalies to entries logged by one of our finance associates, Joanna Marlowe. She was the one who handled the gala auction proceeds. My stomach nodded. Joanna had been with me since the gallery's inception, a steady, reliable presence. The idea of betrayal stung more than any external threat. I grabbed my coat and said, I need to confront her, now. The finance department's office was across the hall, lit by a single desk lamp and the glow of computer screens. Joanna sat behind her desk, head bent over her laptop, headphones muffling the world. When I knocked gently, she startled, pulling them off. Evelyn, what's wrong? I closed the door behind me, forcing steadiness into my voice. Joanna, please sit. I gestured to an empty chair. She looked uneasy but complied. I laid the audit file on her desk, opening to the pages Mark had flagged. These are the gala transaction records. Can you explain why these entries were manipulated? Her face went pale. I don't know what you mean. I pointed to a specific line. This entry on June 25th, auction lot 14, the Maya Jensen VR experience, was logged at £250,000, but the ledger shows only £200,000 credited. Then this wire transfer from Lady Pennington's account. Her lips trembled. Evelyn, I swear I didn't. The tears came quickly. They accuse me of embezzlement, she blurted, voice cracking. When the funds didn't arrive, the board panicked. They pressured me to cover it up or risk the gallery's future. I was terrified they'd fire me. I'm so sorry. My heart pounded. Who pressured you? She looked away. Not a name, but it was someone high up. Someone who thought the gallery's expansion was too fast, that we were losing control. They told me to make the entries disappear, promised me secrecy if I did. I never thought it would get this big. I closed my eyes, anger and betrayal rising. You should have come to me. She sobbed. I was ashamed. I thought I could fix it before anyone noticed. I inhaled, regaining composure. Joanna, this is serious. We'll need to disclose everything to Lady Pennington and the board. Will you cooperate fully? She nodded, tears flowing. Yes, of course. Just, please don't let me go. I placed a hand on her shoulder. We'll handle this, but you have to be honest. I stepped out into the corridor and dialed Graham's extension. We have confirmation. Joanna Marlowe manipulated the ledgers under duress. We need to notify the board and Pennington and prepare Joe for the statement. Understood, he replied. I'll convene a meeting with legal and finance. We'll support Joanna's cooperation but ensure transparency. By midday, I met Lady Pennington once more, this time at my gallery's boardroom, joined by Graham, Mark, and our legal counsel, Amelia Roth. The morning sun slanted through the windows as Pennington took her seat, expression guarded. I began, Lady Pennington, thank you for meeting again. We investigated the discrepancies you raised and discovered that Joanna Marlowe, our finance associate, manipulated the gala ledgers under pressure from an unidentified board member concerned about our rapid expansion. She acted alone, and we are cooperating fully to rectify the records. Pennington's gaze shifted among us. I appreciate your transparency, Evelyn. But this board member, who are they? Amelia stood. We're conducting an internal inquiry. If the board member is identified, we'll address it accordingly. In the meantime, we've corrected the public records, and will release an updated ledger to our audit committee. Pennington exhaled, tension easing slightly. Very well. I trust you'll keep me informed. And Evelyn, believe me, I value your leadership. We moved quickly because the world needs this movement, but it must be grounded in integrity. I nodded. Absolutely, we will not waver. That afternoon, I gathered the entire team in the main gallery hall, clean canvases on display, but the atmosphere charged with anticipation. Reporters had been notified that an announcement would be made regarding the gala audit, Cameras rolled as I took the podium. Good afternoon, everyone. In the spirit of transparency that defines Voices Unbound, I must address recent concerns about our gala's financial records. Earlier, we discovered discrepancies in the auction ledger caused by unauthorized edits from a single staff member, Joanna Marlowe, made under duress. We have corrected the records, and an independent audit confirms our commitment to accountability. To reinforce our pledge to our community, we are establishing a public scholarship fund with £100,000 seed funding earmarked specifically for emerging artists from underrepresented backgrounds. Applause followed, an outpouring of support. I concluded, our mission remains unwavering: to honor every voice, illuminate every story, and uphold the highest standards of integrity. Thank you for believing in Voices Unbound. After the address, Joanna stood beside me, her shoulders squared and eyes bright, despite her earlier distress. Graham and Mark flanked us, offering quiet nods of support. I felt a surge of pride, for Joanna's courage, for the team's unity, and for the resilience of the movement we'd built. Just as the final applause died down, a hush fell over the hall. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen and froze. A direct message from Maya Jensen, the gala's featured artist, reading, *Evelyn, urgent. Check your inbox. You need to see this before tomorrow. My pulse thundered. I opened my email on my phone. The subject line read, confidential, artifactual evidence. I tapped to open and saw a single PDF attachment titled Project Redacted. As I scrolled, images flickered, rendered 3D scans of the discredited scientist installation. But embedded within the scans were hidden data points, GPS coordinates and metadata pointing to coordinates deep within the East End's abandoned warehouses. My breath caught. Was this evidence of someone planting unauthorized surveillance devices in our installations? Or a clue to a deeper conspiracy lurking beneath the surface of our movement? I looked up at the gathering crowd, supporters, journalists, reporters, smiling, applauding, but unaware of the secret that now threatened to reshape everything. My hands trembled around my phone. My mind raced. I slid to the gallery's back hallway, where Camille waited anxiously. I showed her the email. She gasped. This could expose covert operations on our exhibits. I swallowed hard. We need to investigate immediately, and we have to do it quietly. Camille nodded. What do you need? Access to Victor's server logs and Victor himself, and get Graham on the line. As I watched her sprint down the hall, I realized that even as we eradicated one betrayal, another darker thread had emerged. The fight for truth wasn't over. It was transforming into something far more elusive. And in that moment, I knew that tomorrow would test us in ways we'd never imagined. The gallery's alarms triggered a faint buzz down the silent hallways as I slipped out of the public viewing area. My heart pounded, not just from the physical exertion of racing through the corridors, but from the weight of the discovery I'd made last night. Those GPS coordinates embedded within the 3D scans, coordinates pointing to a derelict warehouse in the East End, indicated someone had planted unauthorized surveillance devices within our installations. That breach wasn't merely technical mischief, it was corporate espionage aimed at undermining Voices Unbound from within. I found Graham in the ops center, hunched over a bank of monitors. His face drained when he saw me. Evelyn, he said softly. I pressed the phone into his hand. Look at this. GPS logs from our AR modules. Someone's been feeding us real-time data, audio and video, of private visitors. We've been hacked. He scanned the numbers, brows knitting. This was sent by Maya Jensen? I nodded. She discovered it while reviewing the exhibit files. I need you to contact the authorities and secure the warehouse. Graham's jaw set. On it. I convened an emergency meeting with Camille, Mark, Victor, and Amelia in the war room, a converted storage area where LED screens lined the walls. We've confirmed the breach, I said, pacing. The data feeds from New York and London installations were rerouted to a central server in that warehouse. Whoever is behind this wanted to monitor visitors' reactions, probably to manipulate or discredit us. We need to shut it down and identify the perpetrators. Victor adjusted his glasses. The server logs show encrypted packets sent every 5 minutes. I can trace the outbound traffic, but we'll need physical access to the server to pull full logs. Amelia spoke up. I've contacted legal counsel. We'll need warrants for the warehouse search. Camille bit her lip. Time is critical. If the media finds out, it'll overshadow our narrative. I exhaled. We move now. Graham, you coordinate with the Met. Victor, prepare our forensics team. Mark, oversee secure transport. Camille, draft a holding statement in case of a leak. Everyone clear? They nodded, determination flickering in their eyes. Minutes later, I climbed into the operation van alongside Victor and Camille. The streets of East London blurred past as Graham directed traffic from the passenger seat, liaising with police units on his phone. The warehouse loomed, a squat, gray building, windows boarded, air of neglect hanging like the London mist. Graham stepped out, badge in hand. Police are securing the perimeter. I followed Victor inside, heart racing. Rows of server racks hummed, camera feeds flickering across monitors. Victor plugged in a drive and began copying logs. Camille hovered. This is surreal. I nodded. But today we reclaim control. As Victor worked, I examined the dusty floor and broken pallets, signs someone had moved bulky equipment in recently. A single door at the back stood ajar. I pushed it open and discovered a hidden office space. Walls plastered with printouts of AR interface designs, maps of gallery layouts, and a corkboard pinned with photos of Evelyn Clare selfies, undercover shots from openings and press events. My breath caught. Someone had been stalking me. Look at this, I whispered, pointing to a photo of myself at the gala, taken from behind. The image's metadata included a timestamp, location, plus a note, time stalked Project Insight. Camille gasped. That's the codename we used for user analytics. Someone's turned it against us. Suddenly, Victor shouted, I've got the logs! They traced back to an IP range registered to an obscure firm called Oxbridge Analytics Shell Company. I slammed my hand on the table. They were feeding data to whoever paid them, but who's pulling the strings? Victor's eyes widened. The legal disclosure we got, the anonymous tip about misallocated funds, it was signed Project Insight. My mind raced. Corporate sabotage, espionage, financial smear campaigns could all be orchestrated by the same entity. I pulled out my phone. Graham, any progress on who hired Oxbridge? He answered, breathless. We intercepted an email chain, sent from an address tied to Blackwood at Blackstone Ventures. I'm heading there now. My blood ran cold. Back in Shoreditch, we assembled evidence in the war room. On one screen, server logs. On another, the photos plastering that warehouse wall. On a third, the email headers linking Oxbridge Analytics to Blackstone Ventures, where Anton Blackwood had promised funding. I felt betrayal twist in my chest. He had offered our movement millions, but perhaps the gift was cursed. Amelia spoke, voice trembling. We have enough for a cease and desist and criminal referral. But if Blackstone is involved, this will become a massive scandal. I closed my eyes, weighing the fallout. The mission, to amplify silenced voices, depended on our moral authority. If we compromised transparency to protect image, we'd fail. I opened my eyes. We take the scandal head on. We announce the sabotage, present the evidence. We honor our commitment to truth, no matter how it hurts. They nodded, steely resolve ignited. I scheduled a live press conference at 10 a.m. the next morning. That night, sleep eluded me. I walked the gallery halls, past the illuminated, Voices Unbound logo, past the portraits of the silenced that had become the movement's soul. I whispered to each painting, I won't let you down. At the press conference, cameras and flashes greeted me. Reporters crowded the front row, their questions terse. Graham stood beside me, support radiating from his stance. I began, Good morning. Last week, Voices Unbound was targeted by a coordinated sabotage campaign. Evidence shows that a shell firm, Oxbridge Analytics, infiltrated our systems, siphoned data from our installations, and facilitated an anonymous campaign to discredit our financial integrity. Further investigation traced the scheme to Anton Blackwood of Blackstone Ventures. This individual offered funding for our expansion but, behind the scenes, orchestrated espionage to control our narrative. I paused, scanning the sea of faces. We have provided all evidence to the authorities and have terminated any relationship with Blackstone Ventures. Despite these attacks, our commitment to amplifying marginalized voices is unwavering. We will not be deterred by corporate sabotage. Instead, we will emerge stronger, our movement defined by truth, resilience, and solidarity. The room erupted in questions, shouts, demands for comment. I answered calmly, one question after another, refusing to flinch. After the conference, solidarity messages poured in, support from other nonprofits, outreach from global media, offers of legal and financial aid from unexpected allies. Our subscriber numbers spiked. Perhaps the scandal, laid bare, affirmed our authenticity. I turned to Graham as we left the room. He exhaled. That was brave. I smiled tiredly. It had to be. He placed a hand on my shoulder. What's next? I looked at the sky beyond the windows, sunlight glinting off London's skyline. We keep going. We launched the East End Art Walk this weekend. We finalized the New York relaunch expansion. We prepare for our next stories, because every voice still needs to be heard. He nodded. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The gallery's lights dimmed around me as I walked the empty hallways, past each illuminated testimony. Despite the betrayals, despite the sabotage, the movement pulsed with life. Stories waiting to be told, voices yearning to be heard. And I, Evelyn Clare, would be their champion, today and every tomorrow. Let the world watch. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them! Subscribe and turn on notifications.